Hi, I'm Ashley Brotzel, and this is my Persistent Blossoms blanket. This is not a whole blanket, clearly, but it is the small squares and the large squares. This one is using the interlocking crochet technique. My original blanket was published in Crochet Now magazine, issue 93, published in the spring of 2023, and it used mosaic crochet only, so it's more colorful. The back is striped different. This is my sample that I used to submit to the magazine. So I originally thought about using a blue and white, which is why when I went to do the interlocking, I thought, hey, I'll just stick with my blue and white. You can decide to use one color with your white, or you can do like the original design and have 4 different colors for your squares and arrange them as the original blanket was. You can make this small square with me. I'll walk you through it step by step. The small square is also the beginning of the large square. So this is a good way to get started if you're new to the technique. You can get the pattern, which includes the small and the large squares fully written, and the chart on Ravelry or Etsy. The small square, the written pattern, is also available on my blog. So if you're having troubles following with the video, or you already know the technique and you don't need the video, you can just head to my blog and read the pattern there. This video will also go over the flat braid join. This is my preferred technique for joining squares. I use it for both the mosaic one and the interlocking. And those intersections, we are not cutting our yarn. We already have too many ends to weave in. Use those timestamps to find some tips for doing the flat braid join. And let's get crocheting. You are going to need some yarn. We're going to use 4 skeins of the white, it's the main color, and then 1 skein of every other color. These are all Caron Simply Soft. You can use a different brand if you want, but that is what it is designed for. I use a 5mm hook for my squares, but you can use whatever hook matches your yarn weight or whatever hook you prefer. The main color is white for all the squares, the small squares, the large squares, and for joining the squares. Each square also uses 1 accent color. So we have 4 different colors used in this one. You will need 7 large squares using purple and 6 large squares of every other color. That is the yellow, the pink, and the blue. You will then also need 16 small squares of every color. We've got our main color, which is white, and all of the squares use white as the main color. And then the accent color changes. So each square uses 1 accent color, but then you'll have lots of different squares of different colors. So we are going to use blue this time. And we're going to set up the foundation rounds, starting with the accent color. And I call it a foundation circle. It's making a little circle that will go right here. So we're going to start with the slip knot. Then we chain 8. And then it doesn't really matter if you twist, but try not to twist. I use the back bump. You can use whatever bump you want to use, joining it to the beginning with a slip stitch. So you're going to go through all there and then you're done. But I always add chain 3 because then I'm ready for the next round. So we have our accent color circle, counts as round 0. We're now going to use our main color, which is white, and we're going to create the foundation round, which is going to count as round 1. We start with magic ring, loop it around, cross it at the top here. We're going to go under, pick up the loop, and pull it through. Now you have this weird little loop here. You have to lock it all together by doing 1 chain, and that chain doesn't actually count as anything. It's just tight. It's going to be not, don't count it. This part where there's 2 strings, that's what we're going to crochet over. And I like to make my loop quite small because otherwise it's very difficult to manage. Pull on this tail to make the loop a little bit smaller so it's easier to manage. We're going to start with chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then we're going to double crochet back into this loop way down here. And we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And it says to repeat that 3 times. So that was the first one. Now we're going to double crochet and chain 3, and a 3rd time, double crochet and chain 3. Now you can tighten this And you can see that we've got the cross. It's making a cross, and there's almost a square, but we have to close this corner. This that you've tightened needs to be woven in or it will come undone. Don't forget. And if you see your chains here, we count them from the knot. Then there's chain 1, chain 2. That's where we're going to join it. If you don't want to join it directly into the chain, you can just go into the gap. That's fine too. Slip stitch. And now it's kind of like a box. It's like a circular-ish box. But there it is. So this little dot, you will be able to see, it doesn't count as anything. The circle is round 0. The square on the outside is round 1. And I like to finish off by chaining 3 so that I'm ready for my next round. But that's optional. You don't have to do it. You could do it when you're ready for the next round, you know, whatever. There are different patterns that will join the 2 foundation rounds in different ways. But for this one, there we go. They're done. This is how the foundation rounds come together. So we're actually going to ignore this white for just a minute, because round 2, using our accent color, it doesn't join the white at all. It starts with main color to back. So here's the main color. Yep, it's still behind us, so we're going to ignore it. The chain 3 is in front. Oh yes, we are in front of the white, so we're going to ignore it. And the first stitch says front 1, and that means that we're going to work this whole stitch in front of the white. We're still in front of the white, so we can ignore it. And then our star, it says star, corner, front 2, corner, or star. So that's each side that you repeat. So corner means chain 1, 2, 3. It's actually 2 extra chains because every double crochet that you do has a chain after it. So double crochet chain, that's your front stitch, and then you add 2 more chains to get 3 chains in a corner. And then we have to do 2 front stitches, which means we're going to put the double crochet and the chain and the double crochet and the chain. Oh look, we're still in front of the white. So yes, we're still good. Don't worry, right? Now we're going to repeat that. So it says corner. We're going to add 2, and we're going to do 2 more front stitches. 1 and 2. And. So I'm using and to count my chains, making sure I don't forget them. You can see we've got 1, 2, 3 sides done. We need to do this one. So we got a corner. 1, 2 extra chains, which makes it 3. We're going to do 2 front stitches. 1 and, oops. 2. And then all we have left to do is join it to here. We can't forget to add the 2 chains for our corner. And you can count either 1, 2 and go into that stitch, or you can go into this big gap. It's up to you. The gap makes it a little less fiddly, like if you have to count stitches and find the chain. But I really don't mind finding it, and then I know for sure that my stitches are going to stay quite boxy. So it's up to you. And that's it. If you were getting ready for a large square, you could do your chain 3. This is actually the end of using the accent color for a small square. So you could cut it off if you'd like. Some people prefer to do an extra chain and then that's their knot, or you can just cut it off here, leaving enough that you can weave it in. And if you're using the Caron Simply Soft like I am, it's a slippery yarn, so make sure you leave enough. You don't want it to come undone. So that's actually done. If you're doing the small square, that part's done. And then you have to do round 3 using your main color. And this time they get joined. And remember that the blue, it was always asking us to stay in front, so that's what we're going to do. We're just going to hang on to it in front. I'm keeping my knot at the top, but honestly, as long as you've got your squares, the corner, this tail chain 3 is up straight, and then you've got corners. And then here you've got 2, and there's only 1 chain, so it's not the corner. As long as you keep your corners to corners, it doesn't matter which way you go. So that's just a little thingy-ma-do. So we're going to hold it in front. Round 3 says chain 3 in back, and that's what I've done already. My white chain 3 is behind the blue layer. Then we have 1 front stitch, and you can see that this blue hole, the gap in the blue, shows the chain 3. So that spot is done. Our front stitch, we yarn over, it's going to go into this gap. And essentially we have 3 stitches on the white. We've got 1 double crochet here. This is where the next stitch is going to go, and if you get around to the other end, the other stitch will go here. And when you turn it, then you got 1, 2, 3 again. So that's how you can think of it. You can go into these chain 1, 2, 3. You can go right into the second chain, or you can go into the gap. That's what I prefer to do. But we have to lock them together. So we've got our little blue thing on here, and our stitch is going to go in the corner window, and we're going to grab the white, either that chain 2 spot or the whole window, bring it all to the front, then we yarn over and do our double crochet. And we don't forget to chain 1 after the double crochet. Then we turn, and we're going to start with corners, so that means chain 2 extras, and the first stitch is also in the front. We've already got this in front, so it should be okay. We're going to do 1 front stitch, chain 1, and now we're going to kind of make sure everything is straightened out again, because you don't want to get confused. The next stitch means behind this blue, so we're going to move the blue out of the way, and we're going to stay behind. The next stitch goes into here, right above this double crochet, right at the top of it. That is your behind stitch, chain 1. The next front stitch, we're going to go back into this window, but we're going to do it in front of the blue. So we bring it all to the front and chain. Then we do our corner, returning our work. You can straighten it out if you like, but you can see how this stitch has to be brought in front. We're not going around the blue at all. Chain 1. And the next one goes behind the blue layer. Chain 1. Then this one's going to go in front of this blue. So we're going to grab the whole layer, bring it all to the front. Chain 1, add our corner stitches. This is again another front one, so we're going to keep it all at the front. Chain 1. We're going to go behind this layer. We got to find that next stitch. It's the double crochet. We're going to go right into it. Chain 1. Straighten everything back out and find our corner gap to pull the other corner gap through it. Doing a front, chain 1, corner, and another front, chain 1. So the final step before we join our yarn, it says accent color tail to back, and that is an instruction for the large square so that we're ready for the next round. When we're doing this small one, it doesn't matter because the tail can go through the hole. It doesn't really matter where it is, and we just join it either to the second chain in this little 3 chain space or right into the gap. And this is now technically done. You might think, oh, this little border on the edge, sure, it looks cute, but it's optional. I'll just skip it. You can't. You must do a border because otherwise your stitch count won't work. There has to be a border on the big one and a border on the small one so that you have 11 stitches for each small square and 33 stitches for the large on the sides. The optional part is how many stitches you want to lock in. You have to do a border. The locking part is optional. So every stitch that we have, chain, double crochet, they each need a single crochet. We'll start with the gap. You can go into the chain space if you prefer, but I just go into the gap. And you might need a stitch marker if you're going to get around to the end and not be sure where you are. I don't need one. You might need one. Then at the double crochet, we do a single crochet again. Now in the corner, we have 3 chains. The first and the last chain each need a single crochet. You can go into the chain or into the gap. The corner, the second chain in this is our corner. And in order to do a corner stitch into that chain, we need to do a single crochet, a chain, and a single crochet. And this is where I lock in my corners. So I go into the gap and I pick up the back loop of the second chain in the blue corner. And we pull it up, do another chain, and go into that same spot and do another single crochet. So we still have the third chain that was in this white corner. So I'm going to go into there, and I'm not picking up the blue this time. I'm just doing the white single crochet. So where we had 3 chains in the white corner, we now have 2 single crochets, a chain, and 2 more single crochets. That gets us our increase so that the square can be the right size. And we will continue putting our single crochets all the way around into the double crochets, into the gaps, into the double crochet, into the gap. If you'd like to lock more stitches in, that's fine. In the small squares, I don't find that it's necessary. Only the corners is necessary, but it's up to you. Some people prefer more locking. So we did 1 single crochet into this corner area. The second single crochet is where I'm going to grab my blue, just one thread of the corner stitch there. And then we chain and we go into the same spot. And then we have to go still into the white corner area to finish our 4 single crochets plus the chain in the middle. And that's how we do the border. I will also show you the border for the large square, just a few extra locking instructions. And of course, once you're done, you will have to weave in all your squares, all your ends, I mean. Remember, when you get to the end, we have the gap here, and this is where we had started. So we started in the gap, which means we need another single crochet. I like to find the second chain, and you can go through. It feels tighter because you have all extra things up here, but it's how it's supposed to be. A single crochet, it's a bit squishier. And then I use the invisible join. This single crochet that went into the first gap is the one we're going to join into. And another pull through to make the knot. And now it's time for weaving. So you can see the back. On the back, the corners are stuck, no flaps. And on the front, you can see blue through those corners, just barely, but it keeps everything more square. When it comes to doing the border on your large squares, you'll use the color that you were using. So we finished our final round with blue, or whatever accent color you're using, and we'll continue the border with blue. You do not need to cut your yarn to do the border, but because I was in the learning process, I did cut my yarn and I rejoined it into the wrong spot. So your yarn will actually be 2 stitches to the right. You will be starting right above where you had finished the round previously. Just like with the small squares, you're going to have 1 single crochet in the chain, 1 single crochet in the double crochet, all the way across. However, this pattern has quite a lot along here that's not really stuck together. The flap can get big. At a minimum, you have to do the border. It gets you the proper stitch count. Optionally, you can lock in your corners. That's, I would think, I like it. I think it looks better. And also, you can lock in along the sides once, twice, 3 times, however much you think needs to be locked in. This is where the options come in. You have to have the border to get the right stitch count, but you can lock however many or how little many that you want. So I start here, and I like to lock in the middle, this middle stitch, which is actually at the end of my first half because we always start in the middle. So for here, I'm just going to go into the gap, do a single crochet, and then double crochet. I'll put my single crochet all the way to the corner. And I do find it easy to forget that I want to do the single crochet in both the gaps and the stitches. It's like I'm changing where I'm putting my hook, and sometimes that tricks my brain. You can also just put 2 into the gap and ignore the posts, but it looks better like this, I think. So now that we've reached the corner, we have 3 chains in the corner. The first chain, I'm just going to do a single crochet to line it up with. The middle chain, the second one, is where I'm going to lock this one in. And when I do the locking in, I'm just grabbing the back loop of the chain that is in the middle of this corner. There was 3 chains in the corner between each of these double crochets. So I grab back loop of the white, go in through the window of the blue, and I do single crochet, chain, and a single crochet again, all into the same little spot. For the next side, I have to remember that there's still a chain here that needs a single crochet, and then we're back to double gap, the double spot, the gap, whatever helps you remember what you're doing. And here is where, if you feel like it's too flappy, you can reach back, you can grab a loop. That'll keep it locked together. You can do it every other stitch, every third stitch, randomly, whatever you prefer. I think consistency looks best, but really it's up to you. It's your project. And you don't even have to lock any of them in because they're not actually going anywhere. They're not going to run away. So it's up to you. So this little hole here is my middle stitch of the side, and that's the one I do like to lock personally, but again, it's up to you. And you just need to do 1 round of this blue border to get the proper stitch count, so that you will now have 33 stitches. You'll have a chain in the corner, a chain in the corner, and then you'll have 31 stitches. So counting the chains gets you 33, and your small ones have 11. My little square here is a mess. I totally messed up the stitches and I had to pull it apart after this video when I realized it was all messed up. So don't look at this tiny square, but the stitch count on the side is correct. So that will line up just perfectly. So we've gotten to the end, or the beginning, and our first single crochet was made into the gap. So this chain 3 spot needs to also have a single crochet in it. The place where we just had our yarn hanging out doesn't actually count. So we're going to do our final single crochet on the top of the stitch, and then I do the invisible join going into the single crochet that was in the gap and pull it through, and then a final pull through before I cut my yarn for weave-in. When it comes to joining our squares, we are going to be using white, the main color. That means between all of your colorful squares, you'll have some white. And between all the other ones that are on the border, these small ones, you won't really notice the join added to it. We're going to use a flat braid join. So the yarn needs to stay between what we're joining. I'm going to start with 2 small ones because the small ones go all the way around the edge. I'm going to start with 2 small ones, and then I'm not going to cut the yarn, and I'm going to continue to the big ones. And if you have more, which for a blanket you'd go on to more big ones, and eventually you'd end with 2 small ones. And that way you don't have as much yarn to weave in at the end because you only have an end here and at the very top. Then when it comes to going this direction, we are also going to not cut the yarn at the intersection. We're just going to go right over the join. So I'll show both of those things. To start, we need to find a corner. So in these corners you have single crochet, chain, single crochet, and then another single crochet. So that chain stitch is the one that's mostly corner, and I'm going to use the back loop. And I'm just pulling my yarn up. I will weave this end in later, so this end can just get lost. It can just get out of my way. And then I'm going to find that same back stitch in the corner, the chain, and I'm going to make sure that the yarn is coming from between them, and I'm going to pull it through a slip stitch. Now right now you can pull it tighter, but it's going to keep loosening as we go, so try to ignore it without letting it fall apart. Now we've gone into the chain. There are now 9 stitches and then another chain for a total of 11. We're going to go back and forth, top, bottom, or bottom, top, or however, left, right, however you prefer to think of it. Grabbing the back loop, we're going to pull it all the way through for a slip stitch. Then we go to the other side, and we keep this yarn that we're using in between the squares and pull it all the way through for a slip stitch. And then back over here, we're going to get every single stitch. Now this is where I joined mine. So there is an invisible join here. If I turn it this direction, You can sort of see this extra bump, but we're going to ignore the join. We're only doing the stitches. It is a more difficult spot to be at because I've tightened the yarn, and I know that it's not the most ideal spot to show in a video because then it makes me look like I'm struggling, but I think that you might struggle too sometimes, so maybe that's helpful, right? So this was our join that's invisible. We're going to ignore that. You can count your stitches if you're not sure. Make sure that you've got 11 in this small square. 11 stitches. There's the corner chains, that's 1, and then there's 9 single crochets, and then in the corner again. Try to keep your chain relatively even tension. That'll make your flat braid join look nice all the way along. Okay, so here I can tell that I've done single crochet, single crochet. This is the chain, so that's the last stitch of this side. And because I started with this one, I know that there's also a chain up here. And I am not cutting my yarn. I'm going to join it to my big squares. And because I've been doing bottom to the top, I'm going to go back to the bottom. And this has the same thing in that corner. I've got a single crochet and a chain, and another single crochet. So I grab the chain and pull it all the way through. So then up here, making sure this yarn is between the squares so that it's not like on this side of my hook or anything, right? You want to make sure it's down here. Grab the back loop of the chain, pull the yarn through. Oops, I split my yarn. Let me try again. Back loop without splitting the yarn and pull it through, trying to keep the tension good. It's hard on the intersections. The tension is harder to maintain. I do find having a table helps me with maintaining my tension, and I actually prefer to work as if it's left to right instead of top and bottom. It seems to fit in the video better as top to bottom, but my brain likes to think of it as left and right better. And that's all there is to it. You just go back and forth, picking them up. Now that you've joined, hopefully, a lot this direction, all the way across your blanket, you'd come across this direction now. And we want to do the least amount of tails that we have to weave in later. So we're going to start with 2 small squares here, and then we're going to join all the small squares all the way across. And at the intersection, we will not be cutting our yarn. We'll just go right over the intersection and keep going with small squares. So this is how we start 2 small squares. We're going to go corner, just like we had done earlier, corner and corner, making sure that that yarn stays in the center. And it's still a flat braid join, so I'm just going to slip stitch all the way through. Oops, split my yarn there. And then we go across the small squares here. So we get to the corner. We're going to use the chain in the corner and the chain in the corner. Then we're going to go to the big square and use the chain in the corner. But on the bottom, it's going to be another small square. Or sorry, bottom top, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, the other side, we're going to get the chain in the corner of the small square. And so this is now the first corner and corner joining. Then you go all the way across. This one I'm going to do bottom top, so I know that this is the first one. And then this up here is the chain. So that's the end of this white tiny square. And then go to the next stitch down here. But my next stitch up here has to be a new corner. So I find it easy to just sort of count from the edges. I can see that this one is a little bit more gappy because he doesn't have a stitch attached underneath him. It's just a chain. And make sure that the yarn is still in the middle. Once we get to this point, we need to consider that our squares definitely need to be facing the right direction. If you get a twist here, it'll be annoying. It will be covered up, but make sure that that is facing the right direction and not twisted. But then we just continue as we were. So I'm going to grab the bottom one over here. My next top one is the corner of this one. So nothing really big, just have to pay attention to those minor details. Now, once we are working like this, we want to still keep this yarn between them, but there will come a point when it gets too difficult. Once we get close here, the yarn will be too difficult to reach, and that's when people panic. So this video is hopefully going to help somebody not panic. So you can see it is getting more difficult because there's less space for the hook to come in and out. Anytime you get to an intersection, this is what's going to happen. I can usually manage to get about this far, and then it just feels extremely difficult. So you see here, we have used our corner stitch, the chain, and there's one more stitch here. We want to use this stitch and the chain on this side here before we go over to this side, but this one might be doable to get through this hole. The chain is pretty much never doable. It's just not enough space in here. So we go into the hole and we just wrap this yarn right across the front and we'll just pull it around. It's okay because we're going to be having a full stitch go right across there anyways. And then on the top, we have to remember to do both sides, the corner chain again. And then this one, we're going to go to the corner chain. Our yarn is underneath now, and our stitch just goes right across the top. And we go back to the corner chain. So the corner chain for these intersections gets used on both directions. And then we go back to what we were doing. And it's no problem, just as long as we keep this yarn between the squares and the stitch covers up. If you had to grab your yarn from the other side 1 or 2 stitches early, it's going to get covered up anyways, so it's okay. Then you just keep going. So that's how you do the intersections. That's how you join the squares. That's how you make the squares. So I think we're pretty much done. You can make your blanket smaller or larger than my original design. I've only joined 2 large squares with some small squares as a border for this sample. And the wrong side with interlocking crochet creates such a pretty design as well. And I do love that the front and the back will look so amazing with this technique. This photo is comparing the wrong sides of both techniques. The interlocking crochet one with all the new design on it and the overlay mosaic one. You can see the little stripes are moving from the center out. And I just love that you can use a multitude of colors like the original design, or you can try something more monotone and create a different mood in your blanket. And I am, of course, very proud of my original blanket that has all the colorful squares, and they were done in the mosaic crochet technique for the magazine to showcase. And thank you so much for watching my video. Thanks for all the support. Like, share, comment, whatever we want to do. It's all good. Thank you very much.